Thanks for tuning in today to Ag PhD. I'm Brian Hefty.
And I'm Darren Hefty. Thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about the tough broadleaf weeds in wheat today, and how do you get them stopped in winter wheat and in spring wheat. There are some options that have been on the table for 30 or 40 years, and you know what? Still being used in many parts of the country. There are some newer ones as well. We'll talk about whether they're worth the premium that's being charged in the market today.
All right, we also want to get to one of the worst diseases you can possibly have in soybeans. It's sudden death syndrome. How can you solve that problem? We're going to talk about your options today.
One thing I wish that would suddenly die in our fields is our weed of the week. If you've got it, you know what I'm talking about. We'll show you how to stop our weed of the week later in the show. But first, here's this week's Farm Basics.
Farm Basics is brought to you by the Liberty Link trait and Liberty herbicide from Bayer. The most reliable weed management solution, Liberty Link and Liberty herbicide are the link to efficient row crop production and sustainable weed management.
During our Farm Basics time today, we want to talk about one of the most important things a farmer has to know in his operation. It's cation exchange capacity.
All right, we talk about a lot of things when it comes to fertility and looking at our soils and how we analyze things. One of the most important ones is this cation exchange capacity because it lets us know how much the soil can hold. And isn't that important? If we're going to put nutrients onto a soil, we should know how much it can hold in the first place.
All right, with cation exchange capacity, or CEC for short, it's a measurement of the type of clay you have in your soil, the amount of clay you have, and the amount of organic matter. The higher the number, the heavier your soil and or the more organic matter you have. So, for example, if we say you've got a 20 or greater cation exchange capacity, we would consider that a heavy soil. If you have a 10 or less, we would consider that a light soil. Chances are maybe to a little bit lower organic matter. And what that does, by having an actual number, is it gives us something to go by when it comes to nitrogen recommendations. So for example, farmers don't want to overapply nitrogen. I know we hear a lot in the media about, oh, farmers are polluting the land and everything else. Farmers are going to overapply nutrients because nutrients cost money and it's a waste of money, and the average farmer in the United States last year lost money. Okay, farmers are not getting filthy rich. A lot of guys lost money last year. So they're not going to overapply nitrogen. That's ridiculous. But how much can they actually put on a soil and have that soil hold it? Well, what we use for a measurement is 10 times the cation exchange capacity. So let's say, for example, your cation exchange capacity was 13. 13 times 10 is 130 pounds. If there are already 40 pounds in the soil, you subtract 40 off your 130, and you could apply safely around 90 pounds, and we'd usually tell the guy, I'd stay even a little lower than 90 pounds. So the farmer will do that. He'll use nitrogen stabilizers. He'll split apply his nitrogen. He'll do a lot of different things to make sure that he's keeping the nitrogen on his crop, in his soil, and not in somebody's water.
Well, cation exchange capacity isn't one of those measures that tells you, oh, I have this many pounds of a nutrient out in the field already, but it does give us an idea of the holding capacity of our soil and helps farmers make the best choices when they're applying more nutrients for this year's crop.
Well, one of the things farmers need to make good choices with is weed control, especially when it comes to our weed of the week. Can you identify this week's weed?
Regalia RX biofungicide activates a plant's natural defense system, limiting the effects of disease and improving overall plant health. Regalia RX complements your fungicide program to optimize yield and strengthen return on investment. Ask your retailer for Regalia RX today.
Compaction created during planting leaves thousands of dollars of potential yield in your fields. Copperhead Ag has developed the Furrow Cruiser spiked closing wheel to close the seed trench more effectively. With a unique combination of closing power and control, the Furrow Cruiser provides earlier, more even emergence and higher stand counts, returning yield potential and putting profit back in your pocket. For more information on why you should never run a traditional closing system again, visit copperheadag.com.
Ever wonder if you are over drying or spoiling your grain when you turn on the fans? Do you worry about the condition of your grain all winter long? Are you able to see what is happening in your bins? AgroDry will give you peace of mind with our 24-hour monitoring system. View real-time grain bin data online from a web-enabled device. AD-Link will send you alerts when sensors are triggered by potential grain problems. Stop worrying and start storing quality grain with AgroDry. Visit agrodryllc.com today.
Take a look inside any rotary combine, and you'll find single rotor technology. Technology Case IH introduced over 35 years ago with the Axial Flow Combine. But unless it gives you more bells and whistles with fewer belts and chains, more power using less fuel, it's not an axial flow. Because while the heart of every rotary combine beats red, only Case IH gives you the power to do more.
A farmer's attention to detail is what makes the difference. You take the time for service management because you know how vital it is to your operation. You service your field like everything else because soil sampling makes all the difference and gets the results you want. Download the app Soil Test Pro and start grid sampling today. Keep your farm growing strong. The more you test, the more you know.
With new seed traits and chemistries entering the market, your crop protection equipment needs precision and adaptability. Hi-Pro Innovative Spray Technologies has the products to give your applications greater accuracy, less drift, and more coverage. Hi-Pro, right on technology, right on target.
Broadleaf weed control in wheat, it used to be 2,4-D, maybe even little dicamba, Darren, but now we've got a lot better and safer options.
I remember that growing up. I remember a lot of times it'd be a pint of 2,4-D. We'd head out into the wheat field and try and control broadleaf weeds, and you know what? It worked. And about a week later, there's some more weeds coming up. And we thought, man, is it more weeds coming up, or did we just burn stuff down and not completely take it out? And you look at the new options that are out, and I say new kind of in a loose way because things like Bucktrol have been used for many years. Now we find that in a combination product called Husky, where it's mixed with an HPPD. And if you're not familiar with that class of chemistry, it's really been the most popular broadleaf chemistry being used in corn. And when we see products used in corn and being successful, very many times that gets brought over into wheat. So they've got these two products mixed at a pretty reasonable price point. And we've got broad spectrum broadleaf control. Another one of these newer products, as I would say, is Wide Match. It's Stinger and it's Starring. It's products that have been used in other crops. They're being used in wheat very successfully because you think about broadleaf weeds in wheat, well, kochia and Canada thistle have been two of the most problematic broadleaf type weeds. This one is excellent on both of those. And then you look at all the other things that you could mix with them. Now it might be 2,4-D, although I would caution you against that. You see 2,4-D used to be used in corn. Farmers quickly moved away from that when there were other options. The challenge in wheat has been, wheat is grown in a lot of areas where people are very cost conscious. And you know what, I might not get a crop, I'm in a dry area, I don't want to spend much, and 2,4-D used to be really cheap. Well, now 2,4-D isn't as cheap anymore, and there are actually some options that may be even cheaper than 2,4-D that are safer on the crop. So you should really consider some of those as well.
Well, what Darren's talking about there for safer options specifically would be Addition Broad Spec and Addition Tank Mix. Yes, there are some other products out there, but these are by far the most popular ones. It is still good on many different weeds out there. So you could throw some Addition together with either Husky or Wide Match, and now you've got a much more broad spectrum product. But when we talk about broad spectrum, Husky to begin with is a lot more broad spectrum than what Wide Match is. So if you say, look, all I've got is kochia and Canada thistle, I'd tell you absolutely go Wide Match. Like Darren said, that product is excellent on both those weeds, but the problem is it's not very good on a whole lot else. So that's where you need to throw in some Addition, and a lot of guys have thrown some 2,4-D in there. You can do that, but what happens a lot of times is you'll see that wheat kind of dinged up. If you look real close, you'll see a little bit of lodging, you'll see some of the stems a little off kilter. It's not good. And if you actually do some side-by-side yield checks, very often we would guess on your farm, just like we've seen before, you'll find a bushel or two yield loss. So why do that when you have the safer options?
It depends too. If you're out there at a real critical time of growth and you say, man, I'm really pushing it here, I might be past the spray window, and you still have 2,4-D in the tank, that's where you see big time injury. And what I've talked to many guys across the country that have done is, you know what, I'll start out and I'll spray the first half of the field without the 2,4-D and I'll use something else. Then when I get to the next batch, I'll put 2,4-D in and I'll see out in that field if I see a yield difference between the two sides. What I would suggest is make that 2,4-D strip very small, because you're going to be happy with the yield on the other side.
But the whole thing is, are you visually going to see a difference in the tank? Most of the time, no, because you can't pick up a 1 or 2 or even a 5 bushel difference in the tank. Even on the yield monitor, what are your yield breaks? I'll bet you when you run your yield map, your breaks in wheat are 5 bushels or more. So in other words, anything that gained you a bushel or 2 bushels or 3 bushels, it's not even going to show up on your yield monitor. You've got to look really, really close whenever you're trying to pick out these little things. So all we're trying to say here is Wide Match is a great product for kochia and for Canada thistle. Husky is a great product for a lot of other weeds. If you need a tank mix partner, rather than 2,4-D, you can go with something a little bit less expensive, like an Addition product, an SU, and there are plenty of other products out there too that are going to be safer than 2,4-D and in a lot of cases less expensive. So you can save money, get a little bit better yield, still do a great job on the weeds. That's what we're all after.
So with broadleaf weed control, you may be tempted to say, well, wheat prices are down this year, I really need to cut back. Don't cut back on your broadleaf herbicide. If you let weeds go in your field, you're going to give up yield. And for the little amount of money you're going to spend on weed control, it's well worth it this year.
Well, speaking of weed control, we'll tell you how to stop this week's tough weed coming up later in the show.
Presenting the new 2016 Apache sprayer.
It was very smooth driving down the road, and especially in the field. The visibility is just excellent in it. The wide panoramic view is very beneficial in getting accurate spraying done. I've done a lot of shopping, I've done a lot of price comparing. I could see right away that for what I was getting in this machine versus the competition, this machine will do anything and everything any competitor's machine will do, and it'll definitely help my bottom line at the end of the year.
With the success of the Case IH Tiger Quad Track and Magnum Road Track tractors, it's no secret why Case IH is the leader of the track. So it wasn't surprising when the competition started imitating us. But only Case IH offers a 5-axle design to give you a smoother ride, more power to the ground, with less berming and compaction. Still, we're flattered. In fact, if we weren't already red, we'd be blushing.
There are trillions of hardworking microbes right beneath your feet. Today, Monsanto BioAg is harnessing the power of microbes, creating microscopic farmhands that help plants access nutrients, enhance root and shoot growth, and handle stressful conditions throughout the season, protecting and maximizing your yield potential. We're turning 500 trillion microbes into 500 trillion new farmhands, ready for work. Nature, it's powerful technology.
I trust Agro Liquid because I've seen the results and they're positive, and they work on my farm, they work in my environment. When I started farming, we was farming around 125 acres, and now we're up to around 1,700 acres. I think I was recognized as the Tennessee Young Farmer by being a leader in the community and also being innovative. I'm always looking for new products, but I got to make sure that those products are sustainable. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I would love for them to farm this land.
For lower costs, higher production, Mandico Agri leads with versatility unmatched. Twister is the vertical tillage unit for no-till as well as conventional tillage. Avoid costly downtime with Twister's ease of maintenance. Its unique Coulter suspension allows it to follow the contour of the field yet remain forgiving in rocks. Our hydraulically adjustable Coulter angles mean you never leave the cab, making residue management easier, more efficient. Spring or fall, the Mandico Twister is the new leader. Check with your local dealer or visit mandicoagri.com.
In the last few years, sudden death syndrome seems to be spreading across the country. So if you're a soybean farmer, we've got some tips for you today on how to reduce the incidence of sudden death.
First of all, with sudden death syndrome, we see it more prevalent in fields that were planted very early into cool, wet soils. So the temptation is, well, if it happens when I plant early in cool, wet soils, I'll just plant later. And it's been interesting to look at the research data where fields were planted later versus where fields are planted early into those cool, wet soils. Yes, we do see more sudden death syndrome in those early planted fields, but we also give up a whole bunch of yield if we wait a few weeks to plant soybeans. So the answer to sudden death syndrome is not planting late. Now, if you've got a drainage issue that's causing you to have wet fields all the time, that's something that can be fixed and definitely can be addressed. And in many of the fields, like in Iowa, for example, or southern Minnesota or Illinois, where we're seeing sudden death syndrome, they may be pattern tiled, but that tile may not be close enough together. We saw a lot of guys put in 100-foot spacings in their tile. Maybe they got down to 50 foot. In some cases with real heavy, deep soils, we're looking at 25-foot spacing on tile lines in order to get away from some of this problem.
The best way to stop sudden death syndrome really is having a great variety. But the problem is not every variety will stop sudden death syndrome. So you have to talk to your seed provider. And you know what? The good news here is we've had a lot of sudden death syndrome in the last few years. So the breeders have figured out which varieties are pretty good and which ones aren't so good. In addition to picking the right variety, you can certainly look at some of the new seed treatments that are out there, including Allevo.
Sudden death syndrome starts with a fusarium infection early in the season, and fusarium being a fungus, you think, well, hey, I can just use a fungicide on my seed. Unfortunately, the fungicides we've been using as seed treatments don't have a whole lot of impact on sudden death syndrome until recently. Now we've got Allevo that does have activity against sudden death syndrome, and we're seeing, in many cases, a 2 to 10 bushel response, depending on how severe that problem is. Even in areas where we haven't seen visual symptoms of sudden death syndrome, we've seen a 2 to 4 bushel boost. Another one that's been pretty effective has been Chloriva Complete. Those two treatments have both helped us with sudden death syndrome. Allevo is the one that's been designed to stop it from the beginning.
Okay, with that Allevo though, it also has activity on cyst nematode, and that might be one of the reasons why, hey, it's actually pretty good on sudden death syndrome. In addition to just the fact it has activity on sudden death, it's also helping suppress soybean cyst nematode. Plus, what Bayer has found is when they throw their Votivo along with it, now you get a double hit on the SCN, and you're even better on sudden death syndrome. So there are seed treatment options today that we never used to have a few years ago. That's great. And we strongly recommend, especially if you're planting a susceptible variety, to use one of these treatments if you're in an area that has sudden death syndrome. The other thing you can do is use a foliar fungicide. And you might say, oh, hold on, everybody's been telling me the fungicides don't work. Well, actually, Fortix got a label last year if you spray at R1. They have a label for suppression on sudden death syndrome. So we would still want you to do the seed treatment. We'd still want you to pick tolerant varieties as much as you can. But in addition to that, just as an extra boost, you could go use Fortix, and Fortix is fairly reasonably priced compared to what it's been the last few years.
Another fungicide you may use is also called Preemptor, and that's the same active ingredients that we find in Fortix. It's the exact same product, just a different name. So you could use Fortix or Preemptor. And like Brian said, that R1 timing, you want to be out there just before R1 if at all possible. That timing is really critical. If you wait until after that, that reproductive phase of growth for soybeans is a very stressful time for the soybean plant. If we can get that shot of fungicide out before we see those foliar symptoms, we definitely do a much better job of suppressing sudden death syndrome.
So with sudden death syndrome, why are we talking about this so much? Well, here's the thing. It caught a lot of people off guard a few years ago, and we started seeing yield losses of 10 bushels, sometimes even 20 bushels. It was a major deal. And as we look at a lot of these areas where sudden death syndrome is, we find that guys are raising pretty darn good corn yields, and then they want to rotate to soybeans, and they go, oh man, I can't live with 40 bushel beans out here when I'm getting 220 bushel corn. The 40 bushel beans don't pay the bills. What we're trying to say is you've got to do everything possible to maximize the productivity of your soybeans, and that includes getting this sudden death syndrome under control.
All right, so for me, if I'm going into this year and I say, hey, I've had a problem in this particular field, how do I handle it? The strategy would be, first of all, plant your fields that don't have an SDS history first. So generally they're upland, well-drained fields. That's where I would start. I wouldn't delay planting at all. I just go ahead with my normal schedule. If you say in my farm, I plant from May 1st to May 10th, that's fine. Do the same thing. Go ahead and start on May 1st if conditions are fit. Plant your fields that haven't had an SDS history first, and then leave those fields that have SDS until last. Then look at your varieties. Plant those tolerant varieties out there where you need to. There's a big difference in genetics. Some beans are much more tolerant to SDS. Make sure if you've had a problem in your area before, you're talking to your seed dealer so you get the right ones. Then out in those fields that you're planting into, watch out for compaction, watch out for poor drainage problems. Those are two conditions that favor SDS. Then as you're planting that seed, Illevo with Votivo has been a very effective seed treatment. That'd be the one that I would recommend to make sure that you're getting. And then foliar, when we get to R1, just ahead of R1, spray some Fortix or Preemptor for that last shot to try and keep the plant healthy.
All right, now that's where I got to disagree with Darren a little bit, because I'd say at R1, if you're before R1, you're technically off label on this suppression thing, but his whole point is I'd rather be early than be late, and that's all we're trying to say here.
Well, sudden death syndrome can certainly be a big problem in soybeans, and so can our Weed of the Week. We'll show you how to stop it coming up next.
The Weed of the Week is sponsored by the Enlist Weed Control System from Dow AgroSciences, a new herbicide and trait system that will build on glyphosate.
Farming isn't just in the land, it's in you. Take control of weeds like never before. Enlist builds on the Roundup Ready system, combining proven control of a new 2,4-D and glyphosate in Enlist Duo herbicide. Protect what matters without changing the way you farm. Talk to your seed or crop protection supplier today.
Our Weed of the Week is prostrate vervain.
Now, this is one of those weeds that, okay, you say, I don't see this normally out in the middle of a cultivated field, but where I do see it is around the building. If I'm in town, I see it along the sidewalks. This is one of those weeds that drought doesn't seem to kill. It's one that can handle some foot traffic. It likes these sandy, gravelly, sun-drenched places.
Well,
so
that
it's
said,
tough.
no, it's not. That said, all you have to do is raise a great crop. So if you just get your crop up and growing, you have good fertility, good other weed control. And a lot of times your crop can choke this thing out. It stays relatively low to the ground, so it's generally not a big deal in cropland, which is good because we don't have a lot of herbicides that are labeled on it. Your best bet in corn would probably be Status. In soybeans, we'd suggest Roundup, and in Roundup Ready soybeans.
Or Liberty and Liberty Link soybeans.
Yep. But otherwise, when you get to wheat, I mean, what are you going to do? There's nothing that's really technically labeled. You might be able to use some MCP. Otherwise, our best suggestion would be something like Husky, and you could even throw in a little bit of addition. The problem with this weed is we don't know if it's going to be an annual or short-lived perennial. Sometimes it's either one. So if we've got an annual weed, that's absolutely going to be easier to kill than the perennial. Either way, it only reproduces by seed, so just keep it from going to seed.
I think the big thing here is just to pay attention to the weeds that are on the outside edges of your fields, because they can move in a situation like drought. And so many times we have a drought or a flood, and people say, well, I've never seen this weed in my field. Guess what? That seed's out there because it was there 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the last time you had a problem, or it was right along the edge of your field and it went to seed. And normally our crop competes very well against it, but this year we don't have a thick stand. And so now those weeds were able to grow and able to compete against whatever crop is out in your field. So look at the fence line, borders of the fields, those kinds of areas, driveways. If you've got a grassy driveway up into your field where the wheel tracks are bare and now some different weeds are coming in there, and control those weeds. Pay attention to them because they're pretty easy to stop when they're along the edge of the field. Once they're out in the field, they're costing you yield.
Just use a high rate of 2,4-D or dicamba where needed. Well, once again, our Weed of the Week is prostrate vervain. Stay tuned. Iron Talk is coming up next.
Introducing the SoilMax ZD48, the newest addition to the SoilMax Gold Digger lineup. The first plow designed for smaller class tractors, the ZD48 has been tested on tractors weighing between 10,000 and 16,000 pounds with excellent results. Designed for row crop farms, vineyards, irrigation, and specialty crop farms. The SoilMax ZD48 will install tile up to 48 inches deep, as well as install 3 or 4-inch tile. The ZD48 truly opens up the world of tile installation to more farms than ever before.
Being a farmer means securing your land and livelihood for the future. Harvest Solutions from Capello, USA have the grit to get you there. Our product lines for corn, sunflowers, and forage are designed for efficiency and longevity, preventing harvest loss while minimizing maintenance and downtime. To do everything you can to advance your farmland to the next generation, call us at 855-CAPELLO or visit us at capellousa.com. Capello USA, Italian craftsmanship, American grit.
The experience from the salesman to the building crew all the way through was just pleasant and professional.
I feel that the people at Morton are my friends. I'll do anything for them because I felt they met that with me.
I wouldn't have anybody build me a building other than Morton. I wouldn't even consider anybody else.
It pays to go look around, but by far Morton's got the best building and we're just so pleased with it.
Contact Morton Buildings today during our Building Value Days sales event. Find the building of your dreams at mortonbuildings.com.
I've been involved in developing new technologies in agriculture for over 3 decades. The changing times demanded that we develop new and better equipment. Dry powder applications on seed can only be highly successful if they can be easily, effectively, and accurately applied to the target. That's where our company, Changing Times and CT Applicators, come into the picture. The innovative CT applicators are designed to give you the most accurate application of products such as talc, soybean inoculants, or other dry products. Remember, CT Applicators for the changing times.
We've been dealing with AgriLiquid a little over 7 years. I was skeptical, to be honest, but I watched the results from several clients. Those results were increased production and reduction in input cost. With AgriLiquid, we saw an increase in the size of the initial root mass. For ranchers, that means forage production a lot quicker. AgriLiquid works. The bottom line is profitability.
Iron Talk is brought to you by Case IH.
The AFS Connect Farm Management System from Case IH connects you, and only you, to the information you need most from your equipment, from anywhere, at any time. AFS Connect, only from Case IH.
Static electricity could be your best friend on the farm. I'll explain in today's Iron Talk. Do you use a dry seed treatment of any kind? Inoculant, a biological, even talc or graphite? Have you considered what helps those dry seed treatments and flow aids stick to your seed? Well, it's static electricity. If you've noticed dry products ending up at the bottom of your seed boxes or blowing out of your air seeder or planter, it's due to the loss of static cling. Now, if you'd like your dry products to actually stick to the seed, here's how you do it. First, let's look at the old way of doing things. If you dump dry products into the seed and then spread them out with a broomstick or some other tool, it can work if you do it right. Rather than dumping your dry seed treatment all in one big lump in the middle of the box, though, spread it out thinly around your box. By dumping it in one lump, the seed treatment uses up its static electricity to stick together. When you break up the clump, a good share of the seed treatment doesn't have enough static cling to stick to the seed, and it ends up at the bottom of your box. By spreading it out right at the beginning, the static can attract right to the seed. A better way to do all of this is to eliminate clumping and maintain all the static electricity needed to attach the dry treatment to your seed. Automate the process. We use a CT applicator for 2 main reasons. First, it uses a patented sifter to break up the clumps and provide an even application of dry products to the seed. Second, unlike cheaper competitor treaters, CT uses a stainless steel vessel which doesn't remove the static charge like polytanks will. The result is even product distribution and less at the bottom of your seed hopper or blowing out with your air system. So remember, static electricity can be your best friend with dry seed treatments. That's all for today's Iron Talk, and now back to the show.
Closed captioning for Ag PhD is sponsored by Norwood Sales.
On your farm, you need speed and year-round effectiveness in your tillage program. The Quick Till from Norwood Sales allows you to move quickly through your fields, maximizing time and improving yield. Constructed of heavy-duty materials, the Quick Till is ideal for both spring and fall applications, from preparing a healthy seedbed early in the season to breaking up corn residue after harvest. For more information about how a Quick Till can improve fields on your farm, call Norwood Sales today.
That's our time for today, but if you're looking for more agronomic information, we invite you to tune into the Ag PhD radio show. You'll find us on Sirius XM channel 147 at 2 p.m. Central each weekday.
And don't miss the next Ag PhD TV show. We'll have another Weed of the Week, Farm Basics, Iron Talk, and a whole lot more. I'm Darren Hefty.
And I'm Brian Hefty. Thanks for watching Ag PhD.
Soil is nature's filter to keep contaminants out of our water. To learn how farmers manage soil and groundwater, visit the Responsible Nutrient Management Foundation at rnmf.org.